to disallow prom nights in Bangladesh. I'd like to call the first speaker from the government side to speak. It's time to where's the banner? Ladies and gentlemen, if the purpose of a school is to be a proper guideline for its students, if the purpose of a school is to build up its students as complete citizens, if the purpose of a school is to build up its students on the grounds of complete culture, of upholding the complete cultural tradition of that state, Honorable Speaker, I leave it to your value judgment if it is justified on the part of the schools to promote something so big, so improminent, like prom nights, which is a complete infiltration of outer culture, Honorable Speaker. Now, Honorable Speaker, we, being the House of Bangladesh, today believe that there is complete huge problem in the status quo. It is so prominent that there is a huge need of passing a bill which can solve this problem. That's why we're proud to propose a bill where we believe that we would disallow prom nights in Bangladeshi schools, Honorable Speaker. By disallowing, we're putting a ban on them, we're putting a bar on them. By prom nights, we're meaning those specific parties which are promoted in schools, in some schools of our very country, which is a complete combination of Western culture and which has no influence of Bangladeshi culture on it, Honorable Speaker. Now, what is the basis? What is the need of such a bill to be passed, right? That is going to be the first case that we're going to bring up. We're going to show you why there is a huge problem of the status quo and why there is a need, there is a complete need to actually pass such a bill. Secondly, we're going to show you why it is justified. Why it is justified to choose the schools, Honorable Speaker, the schools on the basic level to solve this problem of the status quo, Honorable Speaker. Thirdly, we're going to show you the aftermath. The good aftermath that this bill is going to bring. The positive aftermath that this bill is going to bring. And we're going to show you how massive difference are going to be created in the process of culture, upholding the culture, Honorable Speaker, if this bill is passed. Right? What is the purpose of the school, Honorable Speaker? The school is the foundation. The school is where the young generation depend on mostly. The school is the... Ma'am, I did not restart my first topic. Okay, the school is something which is recognized by the entire world. The proper is the basic guideline, the core on which the young generation depends on. Whatever the school instills into the minds of those young generation, they are over there forever, Honorable Speaker. They leave a permanent impression, they leave a permanent scope, Honorable Speaker, in these minds of the young generation, Honorable Speaker. That is why, for our purpose, we're going to choose the school. What is our purpose, Honorable Speaker? In the status quo, in Bangladesh, what do we see? There's culture infiltration, Western culture infiltration everywhere, Honorable Speaker. This is so prominent. Why? Because there is Western culture infiltration at the core, at the basic level of schools, Honorable Speaker. We see culture infiltration taking such a huge level that multiculturalism is not the proper word to use anymore, Honorable Speaker. That the proper word to use anymore is the complete absence of our culture and the complete dominance of Western culture, Honorable Speaker, where multiculturalism is not the word to use anymore, not taken now. Please. Yes, so ladies and gentlemen, what do we see? We see this sort of culture infiltration cropping up everywhere. Why is it so? Because we are promoting this ourselves on that ground level, on those very educational institutions, on those very schools which are supposed to have the positive, which are supposed to have the final impact on those young generation, Honorable Speaker. Those very schools are promoting Western culture, which are the prom nights itself at the core. That is creating so many, that is accelerating culture infiltrations to such a massive level, Honorable Speaker. Why are we choosing specifically schools? Because schools are the ones which are formally recognized by the entire world to be the proper guideline, right? What the schools do are prominent in those minds of the young generation, which is acceptable to society. But today, Honorable Speaker, what we are saying, this culture infiltration is not acceptable to the society. And what schools do are supposed to be acceptable for us, Honorable Speaker. Now, Honorable Speaker, that being justified, the reason why Bangladeshi schools have been taken, I'm going to move on to my aftermath. Before, sir, yeah.
But if we do not have a problem in studying under their curriculum, studying their subjects, studying things that they have interest in, what problem we have in trying to have it and become a part of their life?
Yeah, studying things that they have invented. Actually, we make ourselves better. Those are knowledge that you're talking about, sir. Culture is completely different respect your culture, you uphold your culture with the help of those inventions or whatever knowledge you're talking about of those people. Yes, you accept which are good for the country. Yes, you accept which are absolutely recognized, right? Which are acceptable. It is acceptable by the people of Bangladesh to accept those knowledge, those inventions or whatever you're talking about, that kind of sort of education, right? That is acceptable because we want it, right? But this culture, this goes against us in this fact that this is not acceptable to our cultural tradition. This is not acceptable to us. That curriculum does not go against our cultural tradition, but that cultural tradition goes against us. That is why we're specifically targeting cultural infiltration. I'm not taking it, sir. According to their statement, actually it appears to me that they're supporting cultural infiltration. They're supporting Western culture to be our guideline for the rest of our life, which is promoted by school. Honorable Speaker. Now moving on to the constructives of my aftermath. Honorable Speaker, we're going to show you how by passing this bill, A, this will focus on our culture more than that of the other culture. B, how this would promote the removal of the promotion of Western culture in the basic ground level of schools, Honorable Speaker. And C, how this would be the proper guideline for the young generation. This would be described by my second speaker, and my third speaker will come up and point out the clashes, Honorable Speaker. When you see, Honorable Speaker, the first constructive that is focused on our culture. Today, the prom nights are taking such a big hand in promoting Western culture. As I have already told you, prom nights are not multiculturalism because they do not combine Bangladeshi culture and Western culture. This is a complete form of Western culture, right? It has come directly from the other countries. That is why this is not multiculturalism, but this is completely Western culture. So today, this being such a prominent figure in this being such a prominent celebration in the country and formally recognized by schools, Honorable Speaker, it is actually a problem for the state to promote our culture more than that, right? Because today, when we're promoting it in the school level, on the ground level, the young generation are given the idea, yes, it is okay to completely accept Western culture as your own culture, more than your own culture, Honorable Speaker. Today, the existence of our cultural tradition, our cultural functions which are present in schools are undermined because of the presence of these sort of prom nights, right? Why specifically prom nights? Because prom nights are the ones which cannot let us uphold our own culture, right? Prom nights are the ones which begin cultural infiltration at the first place, because prom nights are the ones which are there at the school, like I told you, at the ground level. Prom nights are the ones which we do not want to be acceptable in the society today, Honorable Speaker. So, if we put a bar on these prom nights, there would be a focus on the cultural tradition of our country, right? Because this is a complete infiltration of Western culture today. We want our culture to be upholded, which is not being the case in the status quo, right? We want our culture to get more importance than the other culture. We want schools to perform the responsibility of upholding our culture more on the basis that this bar would be put on prom nights, Honorable Speaker. Schools are not being able to do so by prom nights being a formal function, right, Honorable Speaker? They can come up and say, why not other sectors, right? Why not cultural infiltration in other sectors, right? Why not solve them? Because, Honorable Speaker, like I told you, it's a formal celebration promoted at the school level, right? That is why we're going to target the poor. This is going to be the first step which will influence the other sectors. This is going to be the first step which is going to influence the young generation on the fact that yes, your culture is important. Time's up. Your culture is important than anything, Honorable Speaker. This is how I also proved to you about my second constructive that it's going to remove the promotion of the Western culture, Honorable Speaker. That is why I'm proud to propose this bill where the status quo is not working well, where we need to uphold our culture, Honorable Speaker. It depends on your will.
Ladies
and gentlemen, Team AKS.flv believes that the concept of prominence is not a big enough concept for a government to take such invasive steps such as to ban these proms. We have in Dhaka and in Bangladeshi only 5 schools that allow proms: Scholastica, Green Herald, BIS, ISD, and CGS. Only 5 schools, which basically goes to show that this isn't a big enough problem for the government to propose a motion. Second, does the government have a right to disallow these courses, given that all of these schools that in Bangladesh currently have problems are all private schools? The government has no right to decide what curriculum they will follow, what subjects they will follow, what their salaries are going to be, what the tuition fees are going to be. None of these things can ever be determined by the government, and therefore inviting such a thing and banning such a thing as prom nights that takes place only once a year for a batch, or perhaps twice, but it's junior prom and senior prom, is simply not important enough, nor is it justified. But ladies and gentlemen, what are the things that think about from teen competition side? They think, A, number one, there is an infiltration of Western culture into our society. Why is that a problem? Not justified by these people. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that this Western culture, and in fact cultures all over the world, will always be pervasive in any other culture, and I think it's extremely hypocritical of us to ban prom night when we borrow aspects of culture such as Western cars. That's our tradition. Our tradition is a car that is driven by a cow. That is a tradition. Or Western economy. That is what we're being followed. Or our economy at the moment is not what is derived in Bangladesh. That is something that has been borrowed from the Western culture. Also, the subject of review physics, chemistry, biology. None of these are cultural subjects. These such as geography and geology. These are all subjects that we have borrowed from Western cultures. So we think it's extremely hypocritical of teen competition to say we are going to disallow prom nights simply because it is a perversion or a pervasiveness into our culture. They simply ask you, what is wrong with that? But ladies and gentlemen, they say that school is very helpful in the guideline, and therefore prom night, as this being propagated by schools, is a negative influence. Where we ask you, just 14 years of schooling, 16 years of schooling, and 18 years of schooling of life lessons being taught to you all disappear in one night of dancing, ladies and gentlemen? No, it does not. Because what exactly is this prom night? It is a pride which is held at a hotel or a formal party where people dance. There's a slight romantic atmosphere to it, but that's about it. All this 14 years of education to 18 years of education that has been instilled into these students by these same schools, are they all made invalid, or are they all made redundant by one night of dancing? I don't think that is the case. Secondly, we have to ask them again, how does this culture go against us? Nonsense. So we feel, ladies and gentlemen, no point has been brought about by team competition this Saturday, all the viewers as a model, which is not justified. But we show you that this model has not got a right to stand on Saturday, based upon the fact that these schools are A, private, and B, communist and bigger. But ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to what team competition over here has to be Saturday. We think, ladies and gentlemen, it is perfectly alright to have multiculturalism. And yes, this is multiculturalism, not what they like to term as a perversion of culture. Ladies and gentlemen, we have two main articles discussed. On that one, two main articles discussed. Number one, cultural exchange and cultural evolution, which I will be talking about. And certainly we will talk about how this nature of prom itself does not have any kind of negative impact and is rather a social gathering. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to this first article discussed, which is about cultural exchange and cultural evolution, under which the first there is that there is nothing wrong with adopting certain cultures. Ladies and gentlemen, in the current state school, we dress like the Westerns, we eat like the Westerns, we follow the economy, and we have adopted so many aspects of the culture. In fact, it has made our life very much more the better. So we think, ladies and gentlemen, we are already doing under the Christian school, and if the opposition competition does not conform with that, then it is not fair to assume that there will be public problem. Ladies and gentlemen, we have things such as Halloween, things such as Valentine's Day, that celebrate under these same schools, which are also not cultural rights, but rather these are cultures that we have borrowed from other nations, these traditions that we have borrowed from other cultures and other nations, and we think it has led our world and our cities to be more global and more notified, and therefore we see that the cultural exchange has taken place. In addition to this, we see that there are cultural programs such as Ekushe February, Poila Boishakh, and all these other programs that place several times a year, and these cultural programs far outweigh one night of dancing that is taken place by one person and by one batch in a particular year. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing wrong with cultural adoption. In fact, it has made our lives significantly better. So we think, since we have already adopted so much of the culture, it is no problem to actually disallow prom nights in Bangladesh. If anything, other schools should perhaps encourage it even more, because prom has certain benefits which are going to talk about. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, what is wrong with giving people a glimpse of the outside world? But we say, ladies and gentlemen, that the world is not just Bangladesh. The world has countries, the world has eastern cultures, it has southern cultures, it has American cultures and European cultures. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, if a prom night gives a glimpse of what it is like in the outside world, we think, ladies and gentlemen, it is perfectly alright. Society has evolved to such a state that we no longer are a conservative society. We no longer have a problem with a girl and boy is going to be a name and something that they will be able to identify when they grow up. So we think it gives us more rounded citizens, and this cultural exchange is very, very necessary. So we think this point does stand in such a way that people over here do deserve a glimpse of the absolute culture, and rather this prom is one of the most effective ways of giving this absolute culture, because we see prom existing even in nations like Pakistan, the private schools in Pakistan, and in India. So we think it is completely alright, and this cultural glimpse is necessary for students to become well rounded. On the third level, ladies and gentlemen, we think that rigid cultures are failures. Also, ladies and gentlemen, we have to understand that culture must evolve. Any culture that refuses to accept change, that would not be valuable, will be the ones that easily die out. And we think, ladies and gentlemen, Bangladeshi culture is way too rich for that to happen. Bangladeshi culture is way too sacred for that to happen. However, we have to understand that in this current generation, Bangladeshi culture is a bit not the same as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, this cultural evolution must exist. If, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be forcing the Bangladeshi culture upon them and not allowing people to explore other cultures, then that shows, ladies and gentlemen, that this culture of Bangladesh is rigid, is extremely rigid, and therefore unwilling to change. And this rigidity, I will take that in a second, and this rigidity is what is going to cause this culture to fail and die out, as it has happened in several cultures that have existed for the world. Yes, ma'am. Don't you think the ending of these 18 years keeps a lasting impression on the minds of these people? Yes, ma'am, it does. It is a dance. It is a way to say farewell to their friends who they perhaps will not be seeing for the next 10, 20 years of their life, because it is taking place at the end of the senior year. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it does have a lasting impression, but this is not the only thing that they're getting, because even if the last year of school, they have cultural programs such as February, Pohila Boishakh, Pohila Phalgun, which are taking place, which are intrinsically Bengali in culture, and therefore, ladies and gentlemen, these things also need to be important. So we do not think this form that would be in any way a negative effect on these people. So ladies and gentlemen, let us summarize what we have in this discussion today. We will show you that, number one, the government does not have a significant enough reason to ban these prom rights. Secondly, we will show you that it is not legal and proper. Ladies and gentlemen, which the government has no right to do so. We will show you how cultural pervasions are not actually cultural pervasions, but rather adoption and manipulation and exchange and evolution. We have shown you how, if rather we do not have a malleable culture, cultures are going to die out, and this is something that we do not wish to see. And with these words, my team opposition is proud to extend this discussion. Thank you. So much I'd like to call the second speaker from the government side, please.
I know.
Thank you, for the floor. The motion that has been raised in the House increase House disallow prom nights in Bangladeshi schools, which I strongly support. What they say at first, they came up and said that in Bangladesh there are only 5 or 6 schools which allow prom nights. Well, you know what? Prom nights started in one school and then it spread to others. Yes. So this is how it spread in other schools too. Alright? And this is what we don't want. Why? Because prom nights, as we have said, prom nights is a formal celebration where which is a complete combination of Western culture, which cannot be an example of multiculturalism, because there is a complete absence of our own culture. And schools, what are schools? Schools are institutions to be guidelines for children, and that is why we don't want prom nights like which have a formal recognition to be taken in school, because this is how culture can be mostly infiltrated. Alright. Those who go to school, they are mostly under 18. Alright, so they are not adult enough, and they're at that level of their life, they should acquire their culture more, and then they should know about the other culture. Alright, and then they should take the decision. But what you are asking us to let it happen, that we will allow prom nights, and this is how at the primary level, the school students, they will take the Western culture, and it won't be a combination for all culture, it will be their own culture, rather it will be completely Western culture, which we cannot allow. Alright? And why? Because the government has a right to make up the highest utility for the citizens, which we can by upholding our own culture, and that is why we have the right to propose this bill. Alright, so if you get what we are saying that after the 18 years long of their student life, they have the right to dance one night, and and we are saying that this has a lasting impression. Alright, and if you want to give your students some sort of entertainment after 18 years of long hard work and studies, then give them something from your own, give them something from your own culture. Isn't it good? Because that will be a lasting impression, that will be an entertainment, and that will not be an infiltration of Western culture. Alright, so because that is the responsibility of the school to uphold our own culture. If you give the ending with something Western, that is not what we expect from the school. Yes.
Now, what is wrong with the Western culture?
Yes. What is wrong with the Western culture? Yes, you are saying that this is a word of globalization, and where we should know about all the cultures and take the good things from them. But prom nights, alright, what we are saying prom nights is formal recognition which has a complete absence of our own culture, and the schools and the institutions where it's a primary level, and we cannot let the Western culture infiltrate there, because that is how we lose our own culture. And if you lose your own culture, not take it. If you lose your own culture, if you don't respect your own culture, the world will not respect you. Alright, you are saying that if we don't accept cultures like this, we will go down. But man, in Malaysia, proms are not allowed. They are not going down. Alright, they are there. So if we uphold our own culture, we won't go down. We will be there. Alright, and that's why we don't want proms to take place. But proms are not actually needed. There are other forms of celebration. There are other forms of entertainment of our own culture. That is why proms are not needed. And if you allow prom nights, you are talking about March again, you are talking about 21st February, 26th March. You know what? Because of prom nights, the students wait the whole year for the prom nights to come. They don't wait for our own cultural functions that take place and we cannot take it. So if we disallow prom nights, then this is how we will uphold our own culture. They will be more interested in our own culture. That is where I go on to my constructive, that how school is the guideline for the students, where the guardians send the students to learn things about their own culture, to make their life better by upholding their own culture, and how this prom nights should be a barrier for the schools, to perform their responsibility upholding their own culture. Yes, please.
And you read as the Bangladeshi culture is a mixture of Portuguese and African culture and also Indian culture.
Man, but we have our own culture too. But now what we're doing, we're allowing prom nights, and then there is complete absence of own culture. What we are saying is that is multiculturalism, but prom night is not multiculturalism, alright? And you see what happens. You can say that the students have the right to choose, alright? But the schools are there to guide them, alright? The schools are there to decide what is beneficial for them. So even if the students want, if we disallow it, and that is the responsibility of schools, this is how our culture will be protected. Alright. Then what we're talking about, that prom nights are that functions which are not at all needed for the students. Alright. Because this is how the school's guidelines, what they should perform the responsibility of the guideline of students. That won't take place. And this is how culture influence takes to the primary level. You are saying that a boy and girl is walking through the streets, we have no problem, alright? Because that is the highest form of culture infiltration. But when we allow prom nights, these type of things, the primary, in basic foundation, the primary level in the schools, then those bigger operators are going to take society, then living together, which will have a bad effect in our culture, alright? This is not our culture. And in this instance, so these are really problems, alright? Like living together and having a legal child, because these are not following the Western country, these are following our country. And that is why we can't allow this, because school is the basic level, school is the foundation, and if we allow this type of prom nights, which are the complete infiltration of Western culture, that could be harmful for our own culture. Yes.
Is cultural supremacy a good domain to actually have societal unites? Just because a culture is really good and has very big popularity, it doesn't mean we shun it and not allow culture of society. Popularity has a reason, because it's easily malleable and people accept it and enjoy it.
Listen, it's not that we won't allow it to enter the society, but we won't allow if it's harmful, alright? And what we are talking about is harmful for our society, because this is how we will lose our own culture. This is how our culture will completely uprooted, and that's what we don't want. Because if we have nothing of our own culture, then there is nothing of our own, alright? And if you have nothing of your own, then how can we develop? How can we stand in the face of the world with your own pride, alright? So what we're talking about, that we will let everything, if it's popular, bad or good, to enter society. That means if having wine, if taking drinks is allowed, is popular, we'll allow it, though it's harmful, alright? So that's what you are proposing, which is no, we as a government can let it happen, because we want the good of our citizens, and school is the basic place where it can be started. So that is why we don't want prom nights which have the complete absence of our own culture taken place in the school. Rather, this is how we will ensure that the other cultural functions of our own culture should get the more importance, not taken. Nothing. Should get more importance if these prom nights are disallowed. So this is how in the speech and everything we have left all the points why prom nights be allowed in a culture like ours. Ladies and gentlemen, let us analyze some of the farcical things that have actually come out from this side of the house today. Number one, they believe that one night of prom will magically transform your idea of your own culture, and for that reason, you will be a complete psycho who completely forgets about your own culture. However, we beg to differ, because our first week actually came up and identified that this does not have that much of significant effect on your cultural background at the end of the day. And even if it does change your cultural background, what you must understand is that a culture must be open to some form of infiltration at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But we believe that there is nothing wrong with a certain degree of this infiltration. What we basically got from this side of the house is mass exaggeration, that one night you go to prom, the next night you'll be starting having illegitimate children, ladies and gentlemen. That is basically the gist of what we got from this side of the house today. Now let us move on to some of the points that have been raised by this side of the house today. Now, what they believe is that Bangladeshi culture cannot be infiltrated by any other form of culture. However, you must understand that every single culture, including our culture, our own Bangladeshi culture, is basically a hodgepodge of the Indian and the Pakistani and subcontinental culture itself, ladies and gentlemen. At the end of the day, a culture will develop once it gets ideas and inputs from other cultures at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. That is the whole purpose of how, and that is the whole mechanism of how a culture grows. Therefore, we do not see their entire cooped up purpose of how we will not allow any westernized ideas in. We say that that's a complete farce, ladies and gentlemen. Another thing that they want to do is that they want to protect our culture. Okay, fine, we understand that, but we feel that completely banning only one night of prom will not really serve to achieve your purpose. Because you must understand that there are other methods that you can apply if you want to get better results. For instance, if you subsidize protecting the Bangladeshi artifacts or museum, or actually carrying out more programs that relate to culture at the end of the day, nationwide programs, it does not mean that it's not necessary that banning one night of prom will actually give you the high results that you're actually expecting, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what you must understand is that a prom night is not really as bad as you guys deem it to be, ladies and gentlemen. Because number one, you have parental supervision, and if anything goes wrong, there is no chance of anything going wrong. Another assumption that we have from the side of the house today is that they're going to start drinking. For your information, yes, we will have teacher supervision to ensure that that sort of action will not happen at the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, another point to sort of reinforce the fact that our culture and our daily lifestyle is nothing wrong with accepting these ideas from other cultures as well, ladies and gentlemen. Now also, what they have believed in this house, their basic argument was about how there is really no need for this entire prom night to take place in the first place. However, that what you must understand, it is actually needed as a form of social gathering. It's the last party a person can attend before he or she goes to high school, university, and that is will be elaborated about in my constructed. And the last thing that we want to say, going to a prom night for one night will not make you a foreigner of some sort with a completely different cultural identity.
Do you not understand the significance of that farewell night after those 18 years? Do you not understand the lasting impression that that night gives?
Thank you, ma'am. It is understandable that it actually has a significant effect on you. But yet those lasting impressions will be about how much you're going to miss your friends, how much you're going to miss school, and how much you're going to miss your country if you're going abroad. It's not going to be about how much I dressed in a mini skirt and had fun drinking or something. That's not what the cultural significance of this prom night is about. At the end of the day, it is about having fun with your batch as a united family. Now, at the end of the day, having rebutted to the points that have been raised by the proposition today, let us analyze the arguments that will come from this side of the house. Well, we believe that the purpose of the prom night is actually as a social gathering, and we believe there's nothing wrong with that. Number one, a problem that we have is with this side of the house is that we not really see why this is such a huge problem. The government has to intervene at the end of the day. This is merely a social gathering. Compare it to a class party one might have when they're a fourth grader, ladies and gentlemen. There is nothing wrong with having a class party. A prom night is basically a much more formal, organized version of this class party. And we don't see why this is such a big deal for the government having to intervene and ban them where they do not really have a right to in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. Now let us see why exactly prom is a social gathering. And here is why. Because what you're seeing is that you've been going through 18 years of schooling. And as a result of that, what you basically are doing is that you're leaving your school, right? And you're going, that is the end of your school life, and that is the beginning of your university life. That is a significant leap for every single person. And we will know as we are high school seniors ourselves. Any high school senior will know what it usually is to take. And to end that leap, to end that transition from their school life to the university life, they basically need a party in which they can actually have a nice conclusion, right? What you're basically doing is that for the last time, you're getting united as an entire batch, not only with your friends, not only with your classmates, but also with the teachers themselves, because the teachers are invited and they're there for supervision as well. Now, we do not see what's wrong with that, right? If family gatherings are so important, if it's okay to hang out with your friends, what's wrong with being united with your batch for one last time? We see that it is, in fact, essential for this party to be present, because at the end of the day, we feel that the students need one night in which they can have all the fun they can before they leave their school life officially, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, we see that it is actually an essential party when it comes to a social gathering purpose, ladies and gentlemen. We also identify the fact that there is no chance of illegal or immoral
necessary in order to make sure that the culture exists at the end of the day. Also, we must understand this is an outlet for you to have fun with your batchmates and teachers at the end of the school year, and you need it to be united with your batch. Thank you.
Everything that the opposition said today would have made sense only if prom nights were based on our culture. But the problem here is, it is not based even in the slightest bit on our culture. It is a complete inclusion of the Western culture. Now, what the opposition have failed to grasp is the significance of this last night. After 18 years of life, after 14 years of being with his friends, how significant this last night is. What they're saying is, well, it's important, isn't farewell with the friends important? Isn't a lasting impression of how you're going to miss your friends important? What we say is, yeah, so the last day of school is as important as that. Why do you need drinking and dancing to remember your friends? Why do you need so much uncultured stuff to remember your friends? That your point does not really stand here, right? First of all, let me point out some things they did not touch and we said. First of all, we talked about obstruction of upholding our culture and they never touched that point. Second of all, we talked about some great aftermath and they never disproved those aftermaths. Right. And now let me put some refutals. First of all, dear third speaker of opposition, your words in themselves reflect the infiltration of Western culture. And here we're talking about negative infiltration, right? When you say about prom nights being a good thing and completely ignore the aftermath, not even talking about them for once, you yourself reflect how those infiltration has taken place in all your minds, right? And that is what we're talking about here. And when you say about how it's parent supervised, how it's allowed by teachers, this is where we prove that it makes it even worse when parents allow you to go to a prom and it's officially recognized by your teachers. That's what makes it worse. It makes it valid for the teenagers to go to such a place. It makes it officially valid, officially just, right, a good thing, allowed by everyone. And therefore, that is what makes it even worse. It's not something that the students are doing themselves. It's allowed by the teachers and that's why it's even worse and not really working now, right? Secondly, prom is, what you said is prom is accepting Western culture. We're learning from this. We say prom is not accepting Western culture, prom is overvaluing Western culture. Prom is subduing our culture. Prom is letting our culture not get upholded to the teenagers. Right? That is why prom is so bad. Wouldn't have been so bad if it had even a bit of our culture integrated in it, but it doesn't have, and that is what we're talking about. So this farewell thing could have been done in a positive way. It could have been done wearing normal clothes, not dancing with guys, just talking with them, right? But it isn't done that way. It's done purely the way Americans do it, purely the way those Western people do it, and that's what where you got it wrong. Now, let me. The debate has come to three ultimate clashes, which are number one, whether it's important enough for the government to do that or not. Number two, whether a prom night is a good or a bad thing, and thirdly, whether prom night is ultimately necessary or not. Question: is this prom night important enough for the government or not? That's the question your first speaker came and raised. You see, as my second speaker said, prom night started from school. How did it spread? Because no one stopped it. Everyone saw it as something encouraging, and now a few schools have it. This is how it will keep spreading, and this is the ultimate time to work. This is the perfect time to stop it. So if you stop it now, it won't spread anymore. It's the perfect thing to do right now, nothing else. And if we do not do it now, it's going to spread fast, and it's going to go to a whole new level where it cannot be stopped anymore. And that is why we promote this bill. That is why it is so important for the government at this time. We are talking about the feasibility. This time, that moment is exactly perfect for passing this bill. And secondly, this bill will be preventing the aftermath in the perfect time. Because just won't be too late, right? Secondly, the more important flashpoint of the day is whether prom night is a good or bad thing. Their speeches have implied that prom night is completely just. It is a good thing. There is nothing wrong with it. But that does not stand. Why? I have 3 arguments for that. First, it obstructs our own culture. If it had been, just suppose it had been complete Western culture, but it didn't obstruct our culture, it wouldn't have mattered maybe. But it is obstructing our culture. You see, after 14 years of celebrating Pahela Vaishak and celebrating 21st February, when on the final night of their school life, they're dancing with their guy friends. When girls are dancing with guy friends and people are taking drinks or whatever, it has the most important effect. You see, they take 21st February for granted. It's something normal that happens every year in their life. But is something that happens only once. It is the most important thing they have been waiting their whole life for, right? So it obstructs our culture. 21st February happens all the time. It's happening by itself. But prom night happens is there to obstruct our culture. That is what we're talking about. Secondly, since this has the most lasting impression, this actually subdues all the other impressions our culture leaves on them, right? All the impressions left in our culture are basically suppressed by this most lasting impression of their school life. And that is what we do not want, especially when we're talking about people going abroad. When people are going abroad, they need our culture to last on their minds, not of our life. And thirdly, prom night allows free mixing. They never talked about that. My first speaker said that when people are mixing freely, allowed by the schools, allowed by their parents, and officially recognized as something good, it's actually bad. You see, it might not be allowed everywhere in the world. I'm not taking it might be allowed in India, it might be allowed in Pakistan, but we're talking about Bangladesh, and that's what we care about. We don't care how bad the people are in Pakistan or how good the people are there. We care what happens to our children in Bangladesh, and that is why we bring up this motion. It is just not acceptable according to the basic constitutional values of Bangladesh. That's why it's so important, right? We wouldn't have brought it up at all if it wasn't a special case in Bangladesh. It goes completely against the values, against the basic values of the country Bangladesh, especially when it is used on school level, when it is happening on the most basic core, ground level of a student's life. This brings me to my third point, which is, in the end, whatever happens, we see the necessity of the thing that's happening. Whether prom night is necessary or not. Throughout your whole speech, you have been saying a lot of stuff. You have been implying that it has some sort of necessity for linking with other countries, for linking with another culture, because people do not have TVs, people do not have internet, and prom night to link with other countries. So, we have 2 things to say about that. First of all, why do we really talk about going abroad? How many people are all the students going abroad? You're taking an assumption that everyone's going abroad, and therefore there's a prom night to make that going abroad easier, to make that process to them happier, right? So we don't really base everything on a assumption. We don't base it on some fake guarantee that people are going to go abroad, right? So that is why the firstly your thing does not really stand going abroad and needing the prom night to make that going abroad justified. Secondly, just as
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In this house today, I have to provide just two conditions to the house. Number one is our schools really are important. Just prom really does have that big of an effect on the minds of the children. And the second condition is cultural genocide. Now, to start off with our school, ladies and gentlemen, we understand that schools do have a lasting impression because if you go visit at the same place for 18 years of your life, if you were kept on being introduced to that same thing over and over again, it's nothing but natural that they will have a lasting impression on you. Now understand this message. See, they seem to believe that by just getting rid of prom, you will be making school purely cultural and thereby ensuring the fact that, you know what, the people, the students that the school will be doing will be nothing but cultural things. We understand that, you know what, the prom is not the only aspect of the school that's, well, you know, coming from a Western culture. Ladies and gentlemen, schools study things like English literature, ladies and gentlemen, which is a completely foreign culture in its own. See, and the schools have things like physical education, ladies and gentlemen, which again is an aspect of Western culture. Then the school has studied subjects, for example, biology, physics, and chemistry, ladies and gentlemen. Even further mathematics, things that are derived, things that are gifts from another culture, ladies and gentlemen. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, when you come to us and say that, you know what, by getting rid of prom itself, we could somehow ensure the cultural integrity of the students that the schools have, we find it really hard to believe because at the end of the day, schools itself have plenty of other Western or even other cultural influences, which will at the end of the day contaminate these people and therefore make them not purely our culture but a combination of the two or even more. So therefore, by saying that, you know what, by discontinuing prom, we're not achieving anything. So ladies and gentlemen, let's ask ourselves, what are the aims of the proposition side of the house want to have? Ladies and gentlemen, they want to have individuals who will respect their culture when they grow up, who will not forget or abandon their culture when they grow up. Now, but they want to achieve this by getting rid of prom. Now, we have to ask ourselves whether getting rid of prom would actually achieve this at the end of the day. Now, the opposition side have told you that, you know what, prom is not significant enough to actually make you forget an entire lifetime of cultural teaching, or an entire lifetime of cultural permeability. We've told you that even if the prom itself is not completely a foreign culture, some girls wear a sari to the prom, which is a symbol of our culture and not something Western. Even when we do take prom from another country, we somehow introduce a part of our own culture, and make it something unique, not completely Western, not completely Bangladeshi, but something that we can call our own. See, that is the problem, that is the idea of cultural evolution that we are trying to propose in this course today. Ladies and gentlemen, we already understood that simply stopping culture, simply involving the government, first of all, which doesn't have the right to involve itself in the private matters of the school, ladies and gentlemen, because it's falls into the court, ladies and gentlemen. We understand the government doesn't have the right to do so. We understand that it's a freedom of expression to the students, and we understand that we have to give them a degree of this nonetheless. We also understand that, you know what, the first period told us that came to us and told us that, you know, that those are the constitutional values of our country. Now, our constitution doesn't favor any one culture, from in our constitution, ladies and gentlemen, we were called Bengalis, but to represent secularism, ladies and gentlemen, that term was changed into Bangladeshi. We are Bangladeshis, not Bengalis, ladies and gentlemen. There's a significant difference. And our constitution doesn't even support one culture over the other. Even Bangladeshi culture is a mixture of a lot of different cultures. And I'm not talking about Portuguese or, you know, something those deep. Even in the present time, we have, you know, tribal cultures, for example, up in Sylhet, ladies and gentlemen, or in Chiro, ladies and gentlemen. They are still cultures, but they are Bangladeshi cultures nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen. And yet we identify them and we accept them into our society, ladies and gentlemen. See, cultural acceptance and cultural tolerance will only come if we are introduced to those cultures, if we're given the idea that yes, other cultures exist, that yes, coexistence is necessary, that yes, tolerance should be propagated and accepted into society. And we believe, at the end of the day, these are the values that the school does end up teaching these kids. And even if you stop prom, you cannot stop these kids from getting influenced by cultural influence from other sources. Now we understand that even our own cultures have certain issues. We have certain things that we are not so proud of. For example, getting our daughters married at a very young age. And then, for example, prioritizing males over the females. Now, where do you think, and even now in the current scenario, things have changed. 40 years from now, 40 years from our independence, right now we believe that female education is important. Where do you think we got that idea? We understand that, you know what, the transaction of money during marriage is a bad idea. And where do you think we have such ideas coming from? From cultures that are not completely our own, and yet we have accepted them because they're good with and then we've made them a part of our own culture. That is another example of cultural evolution. As a result, ladies and gentlemen, we understand that on a school level, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to make good human beings, which is again the ultimate aim of these people, we believe that it will be better if you give them the notion that yes, cultural permeability is good and that yes, cultural tolerance should be acceptable. This brings me to my final contention of the author. Something I like to call cultural genocide. Now, they understand this, ladies and gentlemen. They've told us that, you know what, there will be massive cultural genocide if you actually have a prom to go on. Now, that again in itself is way too far-fetched from that side and way too exaggerated to say the least, ladies and gentlemen. See, they've told us that, you know what, the notion that the school is actually allowing this, ladies and gentlemen, the notion of this is that, you know what, it's acceptable, you know what, it's good. Now, we understand that at the end of the day, what the school actually does provide you is a glimpse into the foreign culture. The actual notion that the school provides is, you know what, it's okay, ladies and gentlemen, that yes, there are cultures that you will have to face, but at the end of the day, it's your integrity that you have to protect, ladies and gentlemen. See, if you're not aware of, we understand that every culture has the negative effects, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to find it in our goodness to accept the positive and negate the negative, ladies and gentlemen. But then at the end of the day, we understand that the school proms are important, and it's one thing that the school has that is unique to itself, ladies and gentlemen. They've told us that, you know what, it started from one school and spread to 5, and we wanted to stop it. Now, why ask yourself, why did it start from one school and end up being accepted into 5 schools? Obviously because of its popularity, ladies and gentlemen, obviously because it has a positive intrinsic value, ladies and gentlemen, that is identified by these people and that is accepted and even enjoyed by these people. As a result, from 1, it spread to 5, ladies and gentlemen, and didn't stop at 1, ladies and gentlemen. If there was any cultural negative implications, it could have stopped at 1. But we understand that, again, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, they have to talk to us about overvaluing and the dominance of our culture. We're telling you that at the end of the day, every year, ladies and gentlemen, we have the 21st February, something the entire world knows us for, ladies and gentlemen. Our fight for our language, ladies and gentlemen. Every year we have numerous numbers of different traditions, ladies and gentlemen, that we're continue. We are in no way undermining our culture, ladies and gentlemen. What we're doing is evolving, ladies and gentlemen. We're incorporating our culture. We're telling you that, you know what, yes, we have our own culture, but at the end of the day, nonetheless of what we do, we are still Bangladeshi, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to stick to our own culture. Like I've already told you that we, at the end of the day, wear saris to proms nonetheless. As in, the girls wear saris to the proms nonetheless. And I even see some guys who actually wear pajamas to the proms. So at the end of the day, see, like I've already told you, cultural evolution will take this even if you try and stop this. Because cultural evolution and cultural exchange is imperative for a culture's survival at the end of the day. So ladies and gentlemen, what have the opposition given to the culture? We've told you that, you know what, you cannot stop another culture from influencing this. That will eventually happen. And the prom is not significant enough to actually achieve all the things that you're trying to do. Make us good human beings, make us culturally integral, and at the end of the day, you know, cultural people who are so much into our culture will not abandon it in the future. They have not been able to show us how one night in prom would actually somehow make us end up abandoning our culture in the future, make us forget, make us become somebody we are not basically. They have not been able to show us how attending prom or even why school is the perfect place to start from this. We understand even the school has other influences of course, cultural influences in the prom itself. So we understand that, you know what, let's just let this happen. Thank you.
Any comments for
I really don't have much to say, and that is all from the audience. Why? Because this case provided by Properties Husband is really vague and doesn't stand for a whole lot of water. And since I have rebutted to them in the very first place, none of it is true anymore, and the rest of the debate went on because of formality. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to understand over here the problem that they have provided in this class today is that there is too much of an infiltration of foreign culture into our life. And the solution to it is that we ban prom. Now see, ladies and gentlemen, that is a problem and a solution mismatch because it really doesn't work. How can banning prom remove all of these cultural influence that we have had from the past in addition to the way we dress, what we eat, and how we dress at our own weddings? So see, ladies and gentlemen, this cultural invasion and cultural perversion, as I like to call it, is not really perversion at all, but rather something that has been accepted and has been taken as part of our evolution towards a more globalized society. And we see, ladies and gentlemen, as what we see that is a positive. What has proposition provided us in this house today? Number one, they talked about how there is a necessity to ban this and that the school has to solve this, and there's an aftermath. Three things that have been called on by the proposition. First, talk about necessity, but we've shown you that these children, there really is no necessity because there's only 5 5 schools that does it throughout the country. And even in those 5 schools, it is not a problem. They have not said things like that in these 5 schools there are issues of premarital sex and pregnancy and all that stuff. Even if they said that, that would make sense. But that didn't come. So we see there really is no necessary for disclosure. So that point goes straight down. What else? Initially, we also showing how the government does not have the right to do so because all of these schools are private schools. Secondly, they talk about how the school has to solve it because the school is the most formative part of our learning and the impact that the school has is unparalleled by any other. And we agree with each other. We absolutely agree. But we say that yes, with 18 years of schooling, what the school has provided for over 18 years is what is going to stick in our minds the most. One night of dancing and compared to 18 years of schooling, a very big comparison to make, and we see later, it is obvious that 18 years of schooling as we stand. And in these 18 years of schooling, we have had issues, we have had cultural ceremonies such as Kohela Boisha, which by the way, wouldn't even be celebrated unless the Westerners celebrated New Year's Eve and New Year's Eve. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, this cultural enrichment that we have had within our own culture is largely due to aspects and ideas borrowed from other cultures. So we think, ladies and gentlemen, that schools' impact disappearing all of a sudden in one hour dancing is very silly and does not stand as such thing. In addition to that, we've also shown you that if you really want to protect your own culture, then subsidize the arts. Do things like that. Do not ban prom, which is something that people use as social capital. Ladies and gentlemen, what was the aftermath? Really, the aftermath really didn't have much to say, but they say, well, it's going to be a private impact. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, that argument doesn't hold much water. In contrast to that, what has teach option to what in this history? We've talked about how there's a necessity for cultural exchange, and we've shown you how there already exists cultural exchange. By the way, from team of opposite sides, you all look lovely in those Western clothes of yours. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing wrong with cultural exchange. Also, let's talk about cultural evolution, where we said that these cultures that are excessively rigid are the ones that approach that now. And if we are going to be so rigid and not accept any kind of changes, then our culture is the one that's going to suffer at the end of the day. And perhaps 10 years from now, we will not have Bangladesh culture to speak of unless we accept that there are changes that really need to be taken into account. Thirdly, let's show you about how these cultural, this content is what the symbol representation of what is out there. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with it. What does Ray show you? Ray has shown you this happen, that this cross is social capital, where we tell you that this kind of party that is taking place in a more formal situation is extremely important because it is going to be perhaps the last time we see difference for a very long time. What have they had to say to them? Only one thing, that it may not necessarily be wrong, it could also be other parties, where we say, yeah, it could be, but there is nothing wrong with it being prom, because prom is formal, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. The problems that might exist do not apply in Bangladesh. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, we have provided you a variety of things which have been not referred to, so we're proudly proud to say the day option with this video.
Why is the New Year's Eve different from the prom night? The New Year's Eve is celebrated every year, right? The prom night, it is different. The farewell night, it is special to us, right? That farewell night, throughout the debate, we have shown you how that farewell night is completely different. It's completely special. That those Evolution February is celebrated every year, Honorable Speaker. And what they have said is what? You know what? Prom is necessary because we need cultural acceptance, Honorable Speaker. We are fine with cultural acceptance. What we have told you is that the prom night is there in the last farewell night where you're not upholding our culture, but rather you're using the last night, the special night for upholding the Western culture, Honorable Speaker. The entire debate came down to this, Honorable Speaker. Is this really necessary or not? We have been able to show you that the cultural infiltration is there everywhere, Honorable Speaker, and we have a chance. Why don't we grasp it, right? We have a chance in front of us. We are seeing that there's spread of these prom nights everywhere, and we have a chance of blocking this infiltration right now. Why don't we grasp it? That is the necessity, Honorable Speaker. We need to grasp this chance right now before this prom night actually spreads to all the schools of the country, Honorable Speaker. This is the ample time. Honorable Speaker, this time at the House, failed to judge is the aftermath that we have talked about. How it is necessary for us to uphold the culture, Honorable Speaker. They have mistaken our aim throughout the debate. Our aim was not to create good people, right? Our aim was to uphold our culture more than their ones, right? Our aim was to uphold our culture more than the cultural acceptance. Our aim was to form those ideal citizens with our nothing of our culture, right? And according to them, women wear saris to prom. Guys, wear Punjabis to prom. You want name one person who actually does that. The entire system of prom night is Western, right? That is our problem. What they have gone on and on about is that, you know what? Remember the last night about your friends, how you celebrated with your friends. You remember the last night when you think, where my friend, I think about my friends and those teachers. And guess what? The background is the Western culture. The background behind those friends with us, the background is the Western culture. I think about my friends, and the next thing that pops into my head is, guess what? I celebrated that night with my friends with the help of that Western culture. They have said that, you know what? This last night is significant. They have understood the significance of the last night as well, Honorable Speaker. And after that, they have also told us, Honorable Speaker, that this prom night is necessary. We have shown you, Honorable Speaker, that this prom night is not necessary. The only necessity that they talked about was that this links to the other countries, Honorable Speaker. There are TVs, there are other things that links us to the other countries. But what we need is a last night. It's a perfect, that is special night where we uphold our culture and not their ones, Honorable Speaker. This is where the debate came down to, right? There is no necessity of prom night. There is no necessity of a Western culture upholding our culture on that very special night. Why don't we choose other things like Valentine's and New Year's Eve? Honorable Speaker, the debate does not come down to this. The debate comes down to the special night, the prom night, right? The farewell night, right? And we are using that farewell night basically to get rid of this cultural integration, which is a huge problem in the status quo. According to them, cultural integration is not a problem of the status quo. According to them, having an illegal child is actually a good thing. Honorable Speaker, we did not connect prom night and having an illegal child, but they thought we did. Honorable Speaker, we showed you how cultural integration is increasing to such an extent that it is high time we thought of a solution, Honorable Speaker. It is high time we thought of a core to deal with. And we have shown you how school being the foundation, how school being the responsible one should actually promote that. Honorable Speaker, at the end of the day, we believe we have shown you what the necessity of passing this bill is for upholding our culture for the very last night, and we believe that they have not been able to do that well. That is why